guys, welcome to another edition of the Peristyle Podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Abraham, joined alongside Connor Morrissette, a.k.a. Triple Double. We are back in studio, sort of giving a little recap of what's been going on. We are pushing towards the off season, but we don't know how the season's going to finish. We don't know how USC staff is going to end up, so we're going to talk about all that kind of stuff. Maybe even a little hoops with hoops starting up and USC men's and women's getting out there and doing some stuff. Want to thank everybody for coming in. If you're watching us live on our YouTube channel, we are back live streaming, so thank you for doing that. And if you're listening across the podcasting platforms, you can find us anywhere you get the Peristyle Podcast. If you have a Apple phone and you want to leave us a 5-star review, we got a whole bunch of them that came in. So thank you very much for anyone that sent in a 5-star review. Maybe I'll take a look and see if we got some interesting ones. But Connor, wanted to welcome you back in. How you doing, man?
Doing well. It seems like it's been ages since the last USC game, even though it was a few weeks ago, and now we're just kind of in limbo. What's the bowl game? Who's the defensive coordinator? What's the rest of the defensive staff look like? I wish we had all those answers today. We don't, so let's speculate.
We got to speculate. We're going to do that for sure. And if you have questions and you're watching us live in the chat, you can put those in there. If you have questions you want to email into the show, you can do that too. Podcast@uscfootball.com, or you can call or text us. I think we got 3 voicemails today. 424-254-9141 is the number to call in. Try to leave a brief voicemail, and we'd love to play it for you. We have a couple triple-double mentions in our 5-star reviews on Apple Podcast.
Wow.
Connor. Yeah. So
hopefully they're good.
Garakawa. I should read these ahead of time, right? But I don't, so they could be bad. But they're 5 stars, so we'll read whatever.
Good.
Garakawa says, Triple Double Podcast. Great addition to the podcast family. It's always hard to find info regarding USC men's and women's hoops in the sea of football coverage. This podcast is awesome. Keep it up.
Thank you.
And then we also got Sue Kim, Triple Double Hoops. Outstanding new podcast. Shotgun and Connor provide insightful analysis and helpful. Having Coach LG on for the debut was awesome. So Lindsay Gottlieb came on the first edition of that. So we had some that. So a couple of those mentioned you. So
thank you. And if you liked the women's basketball stuff, tune in this week because we're going to have another women's basketball guest. I think that podcast will drop either Thursday night or Friday morning. So stay tuned.
Yeah. Coach Elman said, USCfootball.com, Ryan and his staff work their tails off to bring fresh perspectives and solid content while keeping USC fans up to date and entertained. So thanks for that. We got a bunch of other ones too. So thank you so much for leaving a 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts. If you have the app, you can do that. It does help to grow the show. So thanks for all the new ones that came in. What do we got going in the chat? You know, what's going on here? The people are in there? Are they yelling at us? What do they do? We got some fight-ons. We got Alex Grinch is coming back. There's some interesting ones in the chat there. So thank you if you're in the chat. But if you do have a question, just put question, and I'll do my best to kind of star that. Bay Area Dodger says, and then hit the like button. Yes, if you're watching live on YouTube, smash the like button, as Chip Patterson likes to say. You're watching live. Thank you for doing that. But you can hit the like button. We got 150 people live right now, so thank you for that. We just kind of put this together. Should we do a show? Let's do a show. We were hoping, Connor, to have some sort of what we call breaking news to share with the folks about USC's defensive coordinator search. Alas, we do not. We've heard a lot of things. I think the administration and the staff, Lincoln Riley, keeping things fairly close to the vest. I think there was stuff that were put out there that was not well sourced or made up, whatever. And people keep hearing different things. We hear different names, and we're waiting to see. I think it's safe to say that this isn't going to be, they're going to go after a powerful name in the world of defensive coordination circles, I guess you could say. It seems like they're going after some big fish. If this isn't going to be this guy was a defensive coordinator 5 years ago. No, these are going to be people that are, it seems like quality people that are being interviewed or vetted. So I don't know. We'll see. Maybe we'll know something by the end of the week, maybe by the end of the show. we'll see. But like, what's your kind of take on what's been going on in this defensive coordinator search?
Before I get there, Duke quarterback Riley Leonard just entered the transfer portal, and he maybe is the most talented quarterback to do that so far. We can talk about that later, but I just wanted to make sure people are up to date with that. That just happened 5 minutes ago. He was a guy who got hurt this year, but if he had played, potentially could have been a first-round pick. So I think he's the hottest name in terms of a QB in there right now. But hey, that's a conversation for a different day. Let's talk about the defensive coordinator, Ryan. So
Eddie says, question, spill the beans on who's the next DC.
Yeah, so
we'll tell you right now.
Everyone wants to know, what have you heard? What have you heard? What have you heard? What have you heard? And the reason the staff and everyone's been so quiet is because not much. And everyone is sourced with USC, and we do our jobs. But if there was rumors and stuff that we were hearing, I'd share it. The only thing I can say, last week I heard a little bit of Jim Leonard chatter, and this week I've heard a little bit of Jimmy Lake chatter. But that's really it. Nothing substantial, nothing, an offer's been made, this guy's interviewed, just little things here and there. So that's the latest thing that I can talk about. And to be honest, Ryan, I've had some downtime because with the no football and the holidays, just looking over all the candidates. If Jen Cohen and Jimmy Lake are on good terms, I kind of wouldn't hate if Jimmy Lake was the guy, and we can get into all this in a second. But that was the latest chatter I've heard. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, there's a lot of chatter, and I think it's a complicated process. It's one you want to get right, and I feel especially for Lincoln Riley. I know, in the chat. Let's see. I'll put up Orwell today said. And this is sort of why this hire is important. They should have started the search after Tulane, at least put out feelers. Doesn't look like that happened. And I think you always have like candidates, that this is a potential thing for happening, that could happen. And you get candidates in the back of your head or whatever, however Lincoln Riley wants to do it. But you're right. So I think the call was, and he had told us about continuity and all that, and it ended up being the wrong call, right? So he should have fired Grinch after last year, did not. So now, it's really important to get this decision correct. But I feel like when we were going through the season, how many fans were telling us he's never going to fire Grinch, he's going to be back next year, they're never going to do this. And if they fire him, they're just going to promote Dante Williams or something. There were the doom and gloomers just they're never going to get anybody good. Well, what we're hearing is they're going after somebody good. And I feel like we don't know what happens on the practice field. We don't know, are they tackling? Are they playing patty cake? We can't tell you because we're not watching that stuff. If you get a Leonard or a Lake or, somebody that's a, powerful defensive coordinator, they're going to have their own set of demands, and practicing the way that they want to practice is going to be one of them, So I feel like we're not sure what's under the tree as far if this is a Christmas present analogy, but the box looks good. It seems heavy. You saw a receipt from mom that had they spent a lot of money on it. So you don't know what it is, but it's probably going to be pretty good.
I agree. I do think though, and it could still be Jim Leonard, but he was the hot name right away. So much smoke around his name. And now the longer it sort of goes, I just wonder, is he still that top guy? Have they gone separate ways? Is it still in play? Just because the smoke around him was so, there was just so much of it last week, and now it's sort of fizzled out a little bit, and he seemed to be that top target. But the longer it goes, I just wonder, eventually you got to make a decision. So if an offer was presented to him and he had Thanksgiving to think about it, it's now Wednesday after Thanksgiving, almost a whole week here, and he's still thinking about it. I just don't really know how long you can wait on a guy like Jim Leonard until you got to move on to the next person. So that's why Jimmy Lake would make a lot of sense to me, or even someone else. But to your point about it being good, I do think it's going to be a name that most people know. But the longer this goes, I just do start to wonder, are multiple people saying no? And I think that's a logical conclusion. I'm not crapping on USC. I'm not saying, they've messed up this search, but just the longer it goes, the logical thing to think is, okay, maybe some guys who they were interested either aren't interested in them, or the fit isn't perfect, or something. You know what I mean? I'm surprised that here we are Wednesday. The portal opens Monday. Guys, graduate transfers are already going into the portal before that Monday entry date because they only have that 1 year left, and USC still doesn't have the guy. That's a surprise to me.
Yeah, Blackie Chan was asking about that, if there's concern. And we do have RG, who has an answer for Blackie Chan and for you. the longer it goes, the better it gets, Connor. So
I think we learned this year that doesn't always work.
Yeah. No, I think it wasn't going to be easy. There are some huge names. There's some people that wouldn't like a Jim Leonard as much, and some people wouldn't like, there's people you're not going to, that's going to be 100% everybody likes them. But, I mean, it's going to be a lot better than what you had last year, right? You're going to be.
You hope.
Yeah. I mean, if it is, I mean, if it's not, you're going to have an epic failure there. But you're going to go hire somebody that has a proven track record, So I mean, there's a lot of stuff that kind of goes on behind the scenes. Can be a bit of a complicated process sometimes. I'm not, if it was like 2 weeks from now and they don't have a defensive coordinator, I think that's where I'd be concerned. Like now it's like it's getting to be like crunch timey with all the stuff going on, but I think you're going to get a big enough name that even if it's a little later, it will still resonate and it will still hold some weight.
And it's fascinating. If it's Leonard, what was the holdup? If it's Lake, why is Jen Cohen someone you want to work for again after how it ended last time? If it's someone who Riley's done an excellent job of keeping under wraps, credit to him. How does no one know? Like, how are there no leaks at all? Credit to Lincoln Riley for that. Is it the Texas defensive coordinator? That's been another link. I don't really see that happening just because I don't know why you'd want to leave that situation. But, hey, I've been wrong before on stuff like that. Those are sort of the hot names. The longer it goes, I can kind of see it being someone we've probably heard of, but a surprise, someone who hasn't been linked at all. And I think that's one of the fascinating parts of this as well.
Yeah, I feel like you hire someone like Lincoln Riley, you spend a lot of money, you want them to just go get the best person possible. And I feel like they're willing to do that. There's a lot of times covering USC over the years, before you got around, Connor, it wasn't always that. Like it wasn't, when USC was trying to hire athletic director, they weren't trying to get the best person. They were trying to get someone that they knew. It was the motivation wasn't always what a fan's motivation is to get the best person that's going to win games. Sometimes he's like, well, this guy we get along with better, so let's hire him for the coach or the AD, or he's not going to make waves. I think Lincoln Riley's trying to get the best guy possible to resurrect this defense that's been bad for many, many years. And to watch UCLA close out the season scoring 7 against Cal. Now, I get Garber's got hurt, but he was out there. UCLA in 4 games this year, Utah, Arizona State, and Cal scored 31 points in 4 games total. And then against USC, scored 38. Like, there was just too many opportunities for this USC defense to do something. And they basically, it was like whoever they played had their best game ever. And that week after week after week, you just can't do that. So I feel like Lincoln Riley understands how important this is. The administration does. You got this offense that can be amazing. You had a quarterback that was once in a generation, and you go 7-5. And I think they all understand how that's not good enough. So they're putting everything behind this. Yeah, like I said, if it takes a couple weeks longer, I'd be concerned. Like right now, I'm guessing we're going to get something before Selection Sunday. If not, if it's like after Selection Sunday, I think I would be a little more concerned. But today, I'm fine with it.
Is there a name you like best? I just, what draws me to Lake is assuming him and Cohen are on the same page, and of course, like Riley is good with it, and if he's hiring Jimmy Lake, of course he is. But just assuming that's all taken care of, I really just like he is a recruiter. He really works hard.
Yeah.
He has ties to Southern California based on what he did in Washington, being able to recruit guys like Trent McDuffie, who was at St. John Bosco. And I think that's really important. Jim Leonard, you just look at the all-time commits list. Jim Leonard's a damn good coach too, but Jimmy Lake, those guys sort of stand out, whereas the Jim Leonard all-time recruits, some good players in there, but it's nothing like what Jimmy Lake has been able to compile. And then just, he is a guy who's a hard nose. He's kind of an a-hole a little bit. And I think that's what you need on defense right now, especially after the last couple of years have gone. How many times have Shotgun sat in this chair and called USC soft, and me called him soft? Like, you need someone to come in there and kind of set the tone. So I like that. He had really physical practices at Washington, and I read earlier this week that one of the players after he left was like, yeah, it would have been nice if the practices weren't as physical. That's football. And I think USC, they could really benefit from a guy who comes in and sets the tone, has these really physical practices. To me, he checks a lot of boxes, assuming everything is good with Jen Cohen. That's the big thing.
I'm still on Jim Leonard's side, and I don't have the video, but he's dunking in that video.
Yeah, hey, played the NFL.
I mean, yeah, like there you go. Like I just like, his track record, like they just never really had a bad defense under him. They were always like top 15 was sort of like the worst. I think maybe there was one that was outside of that, but I kind of like that. I like that he wants to be a head coach. I don't have a problem if he comes in and fixes his defense for a year and goes and becomes a head coach somewhere. I think it can, give him an opportunity to sort of get back on the head coaching track. He was the analyst for Illinois this last year, but I do like Leonard. I think that's like the big name out there. And,
yeah.
There's this weird history with Jimmy Lake, and he was just fired recently. And, he had some weird stuff when he was the head coach at Washington, which whatever, but he's a really good defensive coordinator. And I think recruiting's changed too. Like it's a different beast right now with the transfer portal, with NIL. I don't mind if my defensive coordinator is not the ace recruiter. It's good if you can, but I just rather have better schemes. The more you go back and watch what USC did, like week after week, you're just like, holy cow! That you have a talent level that's here. You could argue whatever. I mean, they got better in talent-wise in 2023, and the results were very similar to the previous year. And it was not good enough. And a guy like Leonard, but I think any one of those guys are going to come in and do a good job and give yourself a chance. Like, apparently you just didn't give yourself a chance to have a good defense in 2023, just the way things were going. We didn't see stuff fixed. If it was too confusing and players were looking at their wristband in week 3, it was too confusing and they were looking at their wristband in week 6. Like it didn't matter. Where on the offensive side, if something wasn't quite working, it was fixed the next week. And the fact that you couldn't fix kind of glaring problems, I think that was a huge indication that you were going in the wrong direction. And I don't know if it changed anything if Riley fires Grinch halfway through the season as opposed to 10 weeks, or whatever, 10 games in. But I don't think the results would have changed that much. But this is the important part now. Like get that big name, the quality defensive assistant coach that can come in and make a bunch of changes, and you got to break some eggs to make this damn omelet. Like you are not going to just, well, here's how we do things. No, come in and do it your way because that's what works, and and go from there. So that's what I want to see, and hopefully we'll know some. Maybe we'll know some by the end of the show, but probably not.
Just based on all the stuff around Leonard, like all the rumors, if he wants to be in the NFL, maybe it's going to be a one and done situation with USC. I just question his motivations a little bit, if that's true. Like if he wants to use the USC job to show, hey, I can do a really good job at being a defensive coordinator. It's not just what happened at Wisconsin. Look, I still got it. And then a NFL team scoops him up. Is he going to be really motivated to build up that next defensive coordinator on the staff where if he leaves, you can just hand it over to the next guy and boom, it's assuming things go really well. Best case scenario, that would be, of course, he's gone because he did so well, and then you can just turn it over to someone else. I just wonder if he does a really good job. Is he interested in just doing a good job only because he cares about going to the NFL, or is he going to try to work with someone else on the staff, a succession plan? I think that's so important because with Lincoln Riley, you're always going to be covered on offense, of course. But defensively, you're kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Because if the defensive coordinator does really well at USC after what we've seen the last 2 years, they're probably going to be gone because they're going to get a head coaching job somewhere else. And so I want this next defensive coordinator in an ideal world to not only do a good job, but prepare the next person so you can just keep this train rolling and keep it going like a Alabama or a Georgia. I know that's an ideal world, but you know what I mean a little bit. If one of those guys or if one of those teams loses an assistant coach, the train keeps running, and ideally that's where you want to get to if you're USC. I know it's kind of dreamland right now, but I think that really makes a difference too.
Yeah, and I think it's important, whoever you bring in, that they have their defensive staff, because there might be someone that's groomed to take over. We saw at Oregon State, Trent Bray was their linebacker coach, I believe. He gets promoted to defensive coordinator. Now he's promoted to be the head coach. Having that succession plan. So if you get somebody that's, like if Leonard is, looking to be a head coach and is going to be in 2025, but 2024, he's got that Big Ten experience too. I think that's going to help, playing against a bunch of Big Ten offenses next year. I think it's a big part of it too. But he's going to have his staff too. And there's probably someone on his staff that would be, okay, this is someone that could be, the heir apparent to running this defense and keeping it going. So you want to get a good system in place. You want to change the sort of culture on the practice field of what, this is how we have to run practice to make sure that the defense works well too, not just the offense. I'm not saying that that's what's happening, but it kind of seems like that's what's happening, that, the more they can't see. So I think all of it's really important. And we're just stalling waiting for the defensive coordinator announcement. Like, what's it coming on? Anything else on that? We can talk some transfer portal stuff too.
One other rumor that I've heard too, again, for what it's worth, the Nebraska defensive coordinator, Tony White, there might be some USC interest there. That's sort of a name that hasn't been talked about a lot, but just wanted to mention that. Who the heck knows at this point, but that's someone who I've heard a little chatter about, and that would make sense if USC didn't get Leonard, or maybe he wasn't the focus of their search initially. That would make a lot of sense to me if they're pivoting and moving on. Nebraska's defense was awesome this year.
Yeah. No, they were really good. I mean, it's hard, too, sometimes when you have a really, really, really terrible offense to say, wow, the defense is great. Like, Iowa's defense is really good, but their offense is so bad. The over-under for Iowa in the Michigan game, like, for their points, is 6. Like, they don't even think you're going to get a touchdown against Michigan the whole game. It's easier to play better defense when your offense is absolutely garbage. So that's some of it you got to take with a grain of salt. We had a comment from Archer. I like that Jimmy Lake is a former head coach. I want to get your comments on this because he is a former head coach that flamed out, was fired under 2 years, never got to coach in an Apple Cup. It's because he got fired before the end. It just did not work. There was a lot of issues with that. But he was a head coach. And I think we saw Ed Orgeron get a head. Now, people that talk about him, he's never been a defensive coordinator. So don't talk about him as a defensive coordinator. But he'd never been a head coach, gets the head coaching job. And I think when he learns whatever he did at Ole Miss and he gets the interim job at USC, and he did some things differently, And I feel like, Jimmy Lake, you learn a lot from that first, especially failed experience. And if he gets another opportunity, then maybe, you do a few things different. But it's that first time. You never know what to expect. But I don't know, what do you think about him having head coaching experience, even though it was a disaster?
His defenses were still good. They weren't great, but you'd take them here, of course. So his big problem was the offenses were terrible. I think they fired their offensive coordinator the week before he had the altercation with a player on the sideline against Oregon that ultimately led to him getting fired. So he had his own issues, of course, and that's a big sticking point for some USC people. They didn't like how that Washington tenure ended for Lake. And to be totally honest, I didn't really think he deserved to get fired. We can argue about that later. What they did on the field, though, okay, fine. He maybe deserved to get fired for that. But based on just, pushing a player a little bit, I didn't really love that. Anyway, I think his defenses, Ryan, were good enough where I think, okay, at least when he was the head coach, it wasn't like he totally lost his identity. When Jeff Collins, the old Georgia Tech head coach, was linked to USC, as a Syracuse fan, a guy who would watch Georgia Tech week in and week out, they were one of the worst Power 5 teams I've ever seen. Jeff Collins had a great defensive scheme at Mississippi State, I think, and then Florida, and then he went to Georgia Tech. He wasn't calling the plays, and it's tough to recruit guys there, but he just didn't get the job done on either side of the ball and sort of fell on his face. I think he left Georgia Tech with the lowest winning percentage of any head coach ever. It was just a disaster. At least with Jimmy Lake, it was also a disaster at Washington, but he didn't lose his identity. His defenses were still good, even though the offense was terrible and he had some other issues.
Yeah. We had a, comment, Blackie Chan, or question. He says, you were talking about Riley Leonard entering the transfer portal. So let's talk a little transfer portal. We can talk about some names, is there a position group, or what's the position groups for you that USC needs to kind of go after the most? I mean, potentially quarterback would be one. Like, you're going to have like 2 scholarship quarterbacks, right? Like, potential quarterback. But what are your thoughts on where USC needs to go?
On offense, I start on the offensive line. I think you desperately need a center. So that's sort of where I start. A second starter would be a big help. So I look at that. I think you can get by. Of course, Lincoln Riley is always going to look for a quarterback if he feels like he needs to do that. But I don't think that's like a huge issue when you're looking at the whole roster right now. Maybe Lincoln Riley feels differently. If Marshawn Lloyd goes to the NFL, he Instagrammed a photo of his Senior Bowl invite. Maybe he is going to go to the NFL. Then I think you probably need a running back. Receivers, you got some young receivers. It wouldn't hurt to bring in one guy, but I think you're pretty well stocked there because you've recruited there really well. Wouldn't hurt to bring in a tight end who's ready, but you do have some younger tight ends waiting in the wings. For me, it's all about the offensive line and defense, though. I think across the board, you can improve, whether it's in the middle, Bear Alexander, who was going to play alongside him this whole year. That was the big question. That was never really answered, so if you could find someone else to play alongside him, that would be great. Edge rusher, Solomon Byrd is gone. Jameel Muhammad's back, so you got one edge rusher, but another one would be a big help. Linebackers, if you think someone can help, why wouldn't you take one based on how this year went? The secondary, if Kalen Bullock comes back, I'm not sure about that, then that's one less position to worry about, but right now you have another one. You hope Christian Pierce is ready, but if he isn't, maybe you bring someone else in. Traquan Fegans is another good player, and I think why can't I remember his name? The nickel safety, Jalen Smith, he'll probably be back. He's a nice, solid option. So you have some guys in the secondary, but I think defensively, if you can improve anywhere, you do it.
Yeah, front seven for sure. Defensive line for sure. I think you got to start with the lines, offensive, defensive line. But I think like a quarterback, Lincoln Riley's had a ton of success bringing in transfer quarterbacks. I mean, Caleb Williams was a transfer, even though we recruited him out of high school at Oklahoma. If you feel really confident, Miller Moss or Malachi Nelson, and we didn't see much of Malachi. We got to see some of Moss. Even just bringing in a quarterback for depth, I think you probably need some help there. But he's got a great track record of bringing in guys that are not depth guys, but like potential superstar guys. So if you get someone in for the spring and there's competition there, but they need offensive line help, they need defensive line help. More important than that, but I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't. If he brought in another quarterback, I guess I wouldn't be surprised.
No, and I would be shocked if Miller Moss and Malachi Nelson were both on the roster in the fall. Maybe it takes them a whole competition to figure out who the guy is so they stay through the spring, but eventually Miller Moss and Malachi Nelson, two highly rated recruits, they know that to reach where they want to reach, they have to play. And if Malachi Nelson doesn't win the job as a highly touted five-star guy, I would be shocked if he sticks around. And same for Miller Moss. It was a big surprise that he stuck around this year. If he doesn't win the job, then I think that he will probably leave as well. Unless both of these guys are content with being backups, but just the read on both of them, I don't think they are. I think they want to go out and play. And if USC brings in a transfer, then I'm sure both of them will probably be like, okay, where do things stand here? Malachi, he's sort of the guy who I look at because it's always been the top recruit after someone leaves in a Lincoln Riley offense that's sort of taken over. And I think Miller Moss has worked really hard, and I really like Miller Moss, and I want him to get a fair chance. But I think Lincoln Riley is going to go with the five-star guy and really try to build him up and try to put him in the best position to succeed. And if it doesn't work, maybe there's a transfer there to be pushing him. But just based on how it's gone, I mean, Spencer Rattler took over for whoever was before him, and then it was Caleb Williams. You know what I mean? He churns out these five-star guys. Is Miller Moss the one to break that streak? Maybe. I don't know if I see that.
Well, see, I think he's looked better from what I've seen. But Malachi was sick or whatever. He had the injury, and we didn't get to see a whole bunch of him. So this spring, I think it'll be important, depending on how much we get to watch of those guys, them kind of going at it and see how they do. But Moss was ahead of Nelson for sure this year. Which would put him, in the driver's seat, you would think. And then it's up to what Lincoln Riley thinks about, can he be the guy? Like, oh, yeah, we can run the offense. He can be the guy. Boom, 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 go with it. Or, we need depth, or we want to go bring in some superstar. Someone put in the chat, KJ Jefferson from Arkansas entered the portal, or is planning on entering the portal. The portal's not open until Monday, December 4th. If you're a grad student, and like Miller Moss graduated, I believe, so like he could enter the portal now if he wanted to. He doesn't have to wait till Monday. But the craziness is going to start really Monday, where there's all these names, and there's always unexpected names coming in. For USC, there's we talk about the acquisition part of this, and that's important. USC is going to try to retool the roster, and Lincoln Riley showed he can do that every year, and he's done it so far. But you also lose some guys. And, it was Gary Bryant Jr. or Kyle Ford or, some of the guys, Raylan Goforth, like, were they going to make a huge difference on this team? Probably not, I don't know. Who do you think had the biggest impact that left USC? I don't want to put you on the spot. Is there someone that had like a big impact somewhere?
Gary Bryant, Raylan Goforth, probably.
Yeah, Goforth was like starting.
2 rotational pieces. I think Kyle Ford's probably a step below. Those are the guys who come to mind for me.
There's some guys I think that went like group of 5. There's some of the Mountain West schools maybe that had, were good or decent. But no one that was just like, I can't, USC couldn't afford to lose that player.
No.
That might change this year because you're 7-5. It's a little different. There was a lot of hope after year 1. You might see some players kind of leave that, USC didn't want to leave. You didn't expect them to leave. But so far, there have been a couple announcements or, guys that have gone in the portal. Nothing shocking so far, right, Connor?
No, it's Raleek Brown, who everyone expected to leave because the whole position change and then the red shirt thing, so that's not a surprise. Zamarian Gordon entered the transfer portal. He didn't play at all, even on special teams. He's a safety, so that's not a big surprise. There's one other guy who entered a few weeks ago, Jamar Sakona, I think, the defensive lineman. So right now, Raleek Brown played a little bit, but right now it's been 3 guys who really didn't have a big impact. I think, of course, Brown as a former 4-star, fringe 5-star talent, a guy who was taken out of his natural position at running back, he's the one you worry about losing the most, but it's not like he was so great for USC this year and it's some big shock that he's leaving. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. We have TH Rocks. Come on, guys. You should have people making calls for info, not this bizarre guessing game.
Maybe you missed the beginning of the show.
That's all everyone's doing. And yes, it's a difficult process right now. This is definitely different USC.
Oh, yeah.
There was a lot of stuff. There were people that you could talk to that worked in or around the athletic department that weren't decision makers, but had a decent idea. You could get pretty good info out of them. Now those people call us a lot of times, like, "Hey, what are you hearing?" And like, "Oh, you work there," but they're not part of it.
The circle is really, really tight.
It's tightened up a lot, so I think that's changed. What's tight too? Going to Trader Joe's. Yeah, I'm very happy right now because I just went yesterday, or it was the day before, to Trader Joe's. I was, my kitchen was a mess. I just didn't have places to put stuff, remodeling and everything. And now it's all like in their spot. And I'm like, okay, I can start putting stuff in the pantry, picking up some of the pasta and the pasta sauce that I like, putting stuff in the fridge, like eggs, bacon, milk, whatever, all that kind of stuff. But just sort of going through, it was good to like walk through every aisle and be like, oh, I could use, I don't have any orange chicken left. I'm going to get some orange chicken. Or, I want some of the veggie fried rice. Or the frozen gnocchi. I'm going to put some of that in the freezer. So it was kind of to go through Trader Joe's and sort of like restock everything after it was depleted and everything got moved around and everything. So very happy about that. So yeah, make sure it's fun right now. Holiday season 2. There's a lot of cool stuff, a lot of holiday themed items that you can get over at Trader Joe's. So make sure you go check it out.
Congrats on the new kitchen being all done, and I saw, like you said, cooking that first meal. That was great.
I did, yes. I picked up broccoli. I picked up asparagus and some baby red potatoes at Trader Joe's, and air fried them. So my new range has an air fryer in it. So and some fish that I had caught, some red snapper. So that was my meal. But yeah, it was all Trader Joe's sides and then the fish that I brought, from the ocean. But it was good. That
looked awesome. Next time you do something like that, you got my number, Ryan.
I was thinking about making it for lunch and bringing them in, so I could have done that for you.
Next week.
Okay. So anything else in the transfer portal you want to mention?
I wouldn't rule out anyone on defense entering. Like, I'm not going to be surprised if anyone on defense enters. We did this as a staff. Who would be the most surprising guy to enter? For me, I'd be shocked if Zachariah Branch and Zion Branch enter. I guess I just said no one, don't be surprised if anyone on defense, but I kind of look at them as a package deal, and Zachariah I don't think is going to enter the transfer portal. So he's my most surprising guy, but like you said, you go 7-5, you kind of can't rule anything out. So I think defensively we could see some head scratchers, or if the new coordinator comes in and people are excited about that, they choose to stick around. It could really go either way right now.
Yeah. Okay. The other aspect, before we jump into questions, because we have a lot of questions, I just want to talk about little hoops for a bit. You've been following along with this. You guys, the Triple Double podcast with Shotgun. You guys talking a little USC hoops. USC women going bananas. The men maybe not as good as you would have liked to see. And they got a big game coming up this weekend. Well, there's a game tonight, right? And then I'm going to be in Vegas Friday, Saturday I'm going to Pac-12 championship game, even though USC's not in it. I'm going to cover. I do the podcast for champions Pac-12, so I'll be covering that game. And then Saturday night over at MGM, USC plays Gonzaga. So big matchup there. So I'll be at that, and Cotter will be there as well. So you're going to be at the Pac-12 championship game too, right?
Yes.
Nice.
I'll be the intern for the podcast of champions.
Yeah, you can carry my shit and whatever you want to do. So that's good. So what's going on? Like, give us the hoops update.
Sure, the women are doing amazing. They had a 1-point win over Penn State in the Bahamas the week of Thanksgiving, so last week. That's really been their only close call. They beat Ohio State, a top 10 team, to begin the season a little bit more convincingly. But they're awesome. Number 6 in the country. Juju Watkins is as advertised. There's some stat that's out there. I don't have it in front of me, but she's the first player, man or woman, pro or college, to do what she's done since LeBron James. Like, she's just on another level. If you have an opportunity to watch her this year, do it. She is fantastic. And she's really going to go, or USC is really going to go as far as Juju Watkins takes them this year. There are some other awesome players too, like Rhea Marshall, but man, oh man, Juju Watkins is special, and she's a big reason why USC is number 6. On the men's side, they started ranked. They've dropped out since losing to UC Irvine when they had a couple guys out, and then Oklahoma in the Rady's Children's Invitational. They played on Thanksgiving against Seton Hall, and then they lost to Oklahoma the day after Thanksgiving. I was there. They lost on an almost buzzer beater. They didn't box out, and Oklahoma guy put in a rebound, second chance opportunity right before the buzzer expired. I think they're just working out some kinks, Ryan. Isaiah Collier has a lot of turnovers right now. You can see how special he is, the true freshman point guard, but he needs to make better decisions and just sort of slow down a little bit. His superpower is going really fast, but he needs to control that and manage that. So Andy Enfield was not happy after that Oklahoma loss, and I think the turnovers have a big part of that, or are a big part of that, and then rebounding, they're struggling to do that. So I know a lot of USC basketball fans will say, oh, it's the same problems as years past. It looks that way right now. I think this team has a lot more talent than some of the prior USC teams, so I will give them the benefit of the doubt right now that they can work through these kinks and get better, but it is a little bit concerning that they were ranked and now they're no longer ranked. Long season, though. It's November 29th, and they want to be playing in March. They got a long way to go. I think they do have the talent to still put together a good March Madness run.
Yeah, we'll see. Final Pac-12 season.
Yeah.
Craziness. Final Pac-12 game will be Friday night when Oregon and Washington play. We'll both be there. Pac-12 Network isn't even doing anything. Like, they don't even have anyone there covering. Like, it's just they made a decision, apparently, like, according to John Wilner, or maybe it was Canzano, I forget, but that they just, budget-wise, they're like, we're not going to go to Vegas and cover this game. We don't know if George Kliavkoff is going to give away the trophy and stuff.
Jeez.
But there's still more. Pac-12 is like hanging on. You get this basketball stuff going on, and then that's really going to be it. But there's a lot to play for in this Pac-12 season. So, it'll be interesting to kind of see when it goes from out of conference to in conference, what it's like. And I'm curious too, because they're trying to keep the conference alive on life support. People are leaving for other jobs. Like, do enough people leave where you can't even just, productions just stop? Like, you can't even get the games on TV. Like that. I'm curious to see if they're able to keep this together, like MacGyver it and keep it together until the end, because people are like looking out for themselves. Like, you don't want to be the last guy there to turn the lights out, but someone has to, I guess.
Should be George K. He should be the last guy there. But
we saw him in Vegas. I saw him in Vegas when I was with Shotgun it wasn't the preseason tournament, whatever that was, where the USC men and women both played. He was sitting courtside for a little while, or very close to it. But I'm curious to see if he gives away the trophy Friday night. Like, will he get booed?
If he doesn't, who would?
I'm not, someone in
some lower level person.
Yeah, some lower level person. We have a request in the chat. 349 people in the chat and only 61 likes. Get in there and like it. Yeah, thank you for that. If you are on YouTube, you can hit the little thumbs up button for a like. If you want to hit the bell, that will alert you when we go live. So thank you for jumping in when we go live and all that. And thanks for liking the stream. We appreciate that. Why don't we take a quick break, and we'll come back and answer a bunch of questions. Back in a minute. All righty, we're back here on the Peristyle Podcast. If you were watching live on YouTube, it really wasn't much of a break. That's more for our podcast feed. We do have to take a break for that. So when we put out the recorded version, that's a break. But there's no break right now. Because you're doing it live, we just kind of roll through with everything. We got a lot of emails, voicemails. Why don't we start with a voicemail? I'll play this one for you, Connor. Get your thoughts.
Hey, Ryan, I just heard on the Colin Cowherd show that Alex Grinch got on the plane. That means he was one of the 5 coaches that came with Lincoln Riley to USC. Nobody else came with him. 5 coaches that he owes. He didn't want to fire him because he got on that plane with him. When Kiffin left Tennessee, no coach came with him. There's so many instances of coaches leaving, and they can't get all of their coaches to leave and move their families and stuff. So I wonder who the other 4 coaches are that he owes, that he does not want to fire no matter what, because they got on that plane with him. Curtis from Moreno Valley.
Love Curtis, but isn't that a simple Google search? It's Dennis Simmons, Brian Odom, and 2 other guys who I'm sure
Benny Wiley came.
Chad will say, you're forgetting these 2. But yeah, it's so Grinch, obviously, and then we can look it up if we take another call or something. But
it doesn't mean that they're untouchable. And Lane Kiffin brought guys with him. I think Ed Orgeron came with him. Monty Kiffin, his dad, came with them. I think that's just one of those things where it just happens. It shows loyalty when you jump on the plane. And he's talking about the plane to go from Oklahoma to USC, but it's not like you're a tenured professor and you cannot get fired. Alex Grinch got fired. I think there's some loyalty there, and he went towards the continuity aspect of it, which I get is, it's important. And the fact that this was someone that stuck with him from the beginning. So I think he got an opportunity to try to get this right, to go from a crap defense in year 1 to better defense in year 2. It wasn't right. It was worse. And then, Riley made the call. So, like Brian Odom, that's great if he got on the plane. But if the new defensive coordinator comes in and says, I'm clearing out the staff, that doesn't make him immune. Maybe it gives him a little, it's nice. Hey, you came along and you showed the loyalty, but you got to get results. And if, the defense wasn't good enough, and I don't think anybody on that staff can say, hey, I did great. Like, I don't think anybody did great. So everyone's, it sucks, but people's jobs are on the line, and you're going to hire a new coordinator on the defense. Everyone is on the, potentially on the chopping block.
I do think the fact that Grinch did follow Riley was significant, and I don't know if that bought him any more time or anything like that. But remember at the press conference that Riley gave, the first one since firing Grinch, he was like, remember, Alex Grinch, he believed in the vision. He was the first guy on the plane with me. He was part of the greatest turnaround in the history of USC football. So I do think, of course, like it would in any relationship, in any field, if someone believes in you and goes with you to a new chapter, that is significant. I wonder, though, if he was some first-year guy who wasn't as connected to Riley, would maybe he have fired him after that Tulane game? I think that's kind of what Curtis was getting at. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's a good question, and it was funny that he brought up those other coaches, but I think that was the question that he was asking, and I don't really know the answer to that.
Yeah, Aaron said Brian Odom and Roy Manning never went on the plane because they were coaching for the bowl game. Yeah, so I think
they just got on a later plane.
There was, but I think his right-hand man, why am I blanking on his name?
Who, Riley's?
Yeah,
Clark Stroud?
Clark Stroud, I think, came. There was people that were sort of like, they're part of this. They're going to come, and plane or not, but just, there was some loyalty there for the people that came over. Let's go to an email this one's from Chris. So he was watching the Washington-Oregon State game. He said, I'm seeing consistent, good running game and good and excellent, in the case of Washington's, pass protections from both teams. When I do a cursory check of the 24/7 recruiting rankings for the offensive line going back to 2020, I'm seeing a similar or lower quality of offensive line recruit from both of these teams, as well as UCLA and Arizona. Oregon's is clearly better, he said. But the other schools, they didn't get as good as recruits as USC. I know we've missed out on some stellar local offensive line recruits, but overall, as I said, our talent appears to be similar or slightly better than the aforementioned teams. What gives? I'm seeing Caleb run for his life, no consistent run game, and our quarterback under pressure when the opposition rushes 3 people. Sometimes our offensive line totally whiffs on blocks right after the snap, completely blowing up the play. What do you think the program is if our talent, based on the rankings, is similar? Thanks, from Chris. Our problem is, not our program.
I'd have to look back at USC's classes since 2020, but the reason USC was in this predicament was because the offensive line, based on what happened last year and then everyone leaving, and now there was no one really behind him. Like, Clay Helton did a really nice job of leaving an offensive line for 1 year, and he did it last year, but everyone behind all those guys, behind the Brett Nealon, behind the Voorhees, all those guys who had been together, Diedrich was a part of that, Monheim, there was nothing behind those guys. So why did they have to take so many transfers this offseason? That was all because the depth was just terrible.
Yeah.
And USC recruited good enough to have a good line for 1 year, but you know what I mean? There was no depth there. So I don't know. I don't think that's a very good argument.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, too, is when you're talking about offensive line, if you bring in like a highly ranked edge rusher, like he'll rush the passer. And, if you bring a highly ranked receiver, he's going to catch a bunch of passes. Offensive linemen, it's different. I mean, there's a lot of offensive linemen in the NFL that if you're going to look at the stars don't matter thing, you look at the offensive line. Like, this guy was 250 pounds as a senior in high school, and now he's 325 and 6. It's like, yeah, you develop a lot more as a player when you're trying to get a big body like that. So I think a lot of it is development too. But like Connor said, USC's, you had some guys, and then everyone after that couldn't play. And so now you had to recruit high school players, which now they have got better high school players, and you're trying to build that pipeline and just sort of like, build up some younger players that could actually come in and play, as opposed to the only guys that can play are the guys you get transferring in. And it's not always easy to put a line together like that. USC's line just didn't fit as well. I think they missed on a couple of guys that you thought were productive that weren't. The other guy from Florida, I'm blanking on his name, like he couldn't make it in.
Ethan White.
So yeah, but a really strong offensive line class the year before, this year, and so you're kind of building for the future. But I think they patched holes in 2022 a lot better than they did in 2023 for whatever reason.
I agree, and I just think last year they only needed to patch pretty much one hole, right? It was left tackle, and they brought in Haskins from Virginia. Everywhere else, it was all returning guys, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, but it just was easier last year. It was a bigger challenge this year, and you're right about recruiting offensive linemen. Those guys vary. Sometimes a 2-star guy ends up being fantastic, and a 5-star guy flames out a little bit. Of course, stars matter, but I wouldn't read too much into like USC being a little bit better than those other programs. I just think this year they were in a very unique spot, needing to replace 3 guys and having no depth. They tried their best. It didn't work. I think the staff deserves a little bit of criticism for it not working, but they were not in a good position, and they swung and missed. It happens.
Yeah. Let's go. We got an email from John. Hey, Ryan, I love your show. Just wanted to mention I feel at the Lincoln Riley house and at the Caleb Williams house and at the other USC players' houses that Alex Grinch stole Christmas and the Christmas holidays. Thanks, from John. I don't know if he stole Christmas, John, but definitely turned a potential, historic, amazing season into a historically bad one. But, yeah, it's a little bit different. Here we go. This is another voicemail for you, Connor.
Hey, Peristyle, I'm so happy to hear you guys. You really give a lot of insight and appreciate it. I'm like everybody else concerned with where the program is headed. The thing under Helton and the previous coaches, which I think brought us down, was the fact that they're not teaching the players. They're not getting them better. And I'm thinking that all the possible recruits are noticing that as well. which is why we're not getting all these 5- and 4-star recruits, because they see that they're not getting better under our program and under Coach Lincoln Riley. So why would I want to go there if I'm not going to get better? Because as I understand it, the goal is to get in the NFL. So anyways, I wanted to know what your thoughts are on that, or if you have another reason why we're not able to get 5- and 4-star recruits. Because under Carroll, man, we got 5- and 4-star recruits all over the board. We were always top 5 in recruiting, and obviously we need to do that. So I look forward to hearing from you. Thank you. Bye.
I think that's certainly a problem. I think the biggest problem is NIL, first and foremost. Why are you struggling to get 4- or 5-star guys consistently in this 2024 class? You got to look at NIL first, but I don't think it helps when a young guy in the secondary looks from around the country, looks and sees like Damani Jackson struggle and Sierra Wright struggle. And this is just off the top of my head, but defensively, that question kind of makes me think of the defense. Like USC has brought in some good quality players on defense, and they just haven't really translated so far. So if I was a recruit, I'd certainly take note of that. But I think first and foremost, Ryan, we've talked about it a million times, the NIL stuff. If another school can have the sort of reputation that USC does, like in Oregon, and they can also give kids a little bit of dough, like that makes a big difference.
No, it does. I mean, Blackie Chan had a question in the chat about that. It's like, no, there really hasn't been a change there. I do think the landscape might be changing a little bit. Unfortunately, like USC goes up against Oregon, and I think Oregon is still putting a lot of money into the high school recruiting. Like they're trying to, I think Phil Knight wants to win a championship there before he's, during his lifetime. And that, he's in his 80s now, I think. So I think they're pulling out all the stops, and a lot of that's taking guys away from USC, just them forcing their way kind of into the Big Ten, just, not letting USC sort of separate. I think it's something USC definitely has to address, but I think in general, the market for transfer portal players is more significant as far as like trying to get guys. There was a report up in Washington that Cam Ward had multiple $1 million plus offers for his services, the quarterback. I forget the coach recently just said that, it might have been at Nebraska, they were talking about Matt Rule that if you're going to get a quarterback, it's like $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million. Like that's what it costs to come out of the portal. I feel like the proven player stuff, there's more money going in there, and I think USC can play in that pool, which is good, and maybe not as much for the high school player. Which if it sort of goes away from that helps USC because USC doesn't really play there, but they do play in the transfer portal market, and that's where it seems like that's where more of the funds are going. But you're right. I mean, you're going to miss out on high school guys that there are high school players that want to be paid to take a visit to your school. USC's not doing that. There's schools that aren't, but there's a lot of schools that are, and then you kind of eliminate yourself from that recruit. Like if you're talking like Stanford, they were getting 4- and 5-star guys before, but they had to be the certain kind of 4- and 5-star guys. USC sort of now in that mode where you can still get 4- and 5-star guys, but they have to be the certain kind, the ones that NIL money for high school isn't their most important thing. If that is, USC's probably not in that recruiting battle. If that makes sense.
I agree with all that. I just think, though, like, kids get a bad rap for, if that's their number one thing, like, then USC isn't the place for them. But a lot of times, like, can you blame a kid for having that be such an important part of it? Like,
No.
That goes a long way to helping not only the kid, but families and other people around them. So I think that's, of course, going back to the call, that's the biggest factor for why you aren't seeing any 5-stars in 2024 and a limited number of 4-star guys in that class. But what the caller brought up about the optics, guys on defense who were in the position of some of the big-time recruits not performing well, and seeing that at USC, I don't think that helps either. So I thought that was a good point too.
Yeah. This was a point. So Texas A&M ended up hiring Mike Elko. They were really going after just the highest-ranked players all the time. And Demon says, the mercenary recruits aren't coming here and not sure we want that type of player. See Texas A&M. if you are only trying to recruit the top talent and not necessarily someone that fits, you can see a disaster like that happen. So, yeah, I mean, everyone wants those guys, but it doesn't necessarily equal success. But USC's missed out on a bunch of them. You'd like to get some of those guys that would fit in with the program well.
Yeah, and I agree, but like Texas has recruited really well. They're a game away from winning their conference. Georgia always recruits well. Alabama always, of course, recruits well. Oregon's recruited really well historically. Florida State under Mike Norvell's recruited really well. Like, is it any surprise that all those teams have a shot to win the national championship if things fall their way? Like, you can look at Texas A&M and say, oh, we don't want a lot of those 5 stars. Look at how it blew up in Texas A&M's face. I think that's sort of something that people shouldn't be paying attention to. Like, yeah, it didn't work for them, so we don't want to do it. But look at all these other schools where it did work. You got to recruit, and the more 5-star guys you get, just of course character issues, you can't overlook that, and you got to pick your spots. But I don't like that argument a lot. Like, look at Texas A&M; they recruited really well, and they've fallen on their face. Other teams have recruited really well, and it's going a lot better for them.
Yeah, we had a long email from Brendan in Reno. He has 16 defensive coordinator candidates, and he ranks them all. And he's got Glenn Schumann at the top of his list. Will Muschamp is up there. Dave Aranda, who's staying at Baylor, so he wouldn't be coming. He likes Manny Diaz a lot. But he doesn't have Jim Leonard down till number 9 and Jimmy Lake number 10, Connor. So he's not big on your guys. He's got Toss Poy at number 11. I don't know about that at all. But, and D'Anton Lenny has at 16. But a big list there. So thank you for sending that in. I can't go over like all this. But he says he wanted to factor in scheme, recruiting, player development, scheme fit for our roster and our recruiting territory, and lastly, who they've worked with in the past as possible position coach candidates. He says that Leonard has great scheme and develops players, but he lacks recruiting and scheme fit as he deploys a 2-gap system that requires a big body defensive line, and USC has a hard time landing those kind of guys. He's also only coach at Wisconsin, who already had a great defense from Miranda and Wilcox before him. So a rebuild might not be a strong suit. That's interesting. Finally, his Rolodex of assistant coaches is smaller and less impressive than other candidates. So that was why he didn't have Leonard as high.
Makes sense. Glenn Schumann, of course, the Georgia defensive coordinator. I just don't know why he would make that jump to USC. But if you could have anyone, like, that would make sense. So if that list, I don't know if it was realistic candidates, but if it was just candidates across the board, then that would make sense to me. They just got to get this hire done, Ryan. The longer it goes, man, come on. It's time to turn the page. I'm ready for recruiting. I'm ready for the transfer portal. I'm ready for just, like you plug it in, the spark. Like, this team needs some juice. And here we are still waiting.
Yeah, need some juice. John in Oakland wrote a couple emails. He said, do you have any idea who Coach Riley uses as a sounding board for ideas and things associated with his program, a so-called informal kitchen cabinet? Who does he trust to advise him on potential changes to the defensive for the defense and special teams? And who are his close friends from the college and NFL ranks that he can solicit objective critiques from his performance as a head coach? Regards, John in Oakland.
Great question. I don't know. I haven't asked him that. Bob Stoops comes to mind, who was at Oklahoma, of course, before Riley took over. I wouldn't be surprised if he speaks with him and bounces ideas off of him. Mike Leach, of course, was a sounding board for Riley before he passed away.
Yeah.
So a really sad loss there, and that affected Riley because they were friends. So he is no longer with us, so he's not doing that anymore. But those are two names that come to my head. I think Dennis Simmons and Riley are best friends. So even though they're on the same staff, I'm sure they talk a lot and they figure out a lot of stuff together too. Clark Stroud has been Riley's right-hand man on the staff now. I forget his official title, but I think those are kind of Riley's circle, but I'm sure there are names I'm missing.
I think like Dave Nickel, who passed away as well, I think someone that he was close with. But yeah, I think you want that a little bit. But I feel like, too, you want people around you that are part of the day-to-day that can tell you no, and, it's hard to say if you get you want people like that. You don't want yes men all around you all the time. You want people to be able to push back and go, no, that's not a good idea. Like, you shouldn't do that, and here's why. So hopefully he has those kind of people around him. But he's a pretty private person, so I think he keeps a lot of that stuff private as well. John says, do you think that the NCAA Autonomous 5 power conferences would approve raising the number of assistant football coaches from 10 to 11?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
Why is that even a question? Is that just people want that, or like?
I guess maybe you could get a special teams coach or something, or a special teams coordinator. That's probably where John's coming from there. But I haven't heard that as something that's been discussed, so I'm not sure, John. And he says, who's going to show up for who's going to show the upcoming spring football games for the 10 programs leaving the Pac-12, the Pac-12 networks, or their future conference networks? Regards from John.
That's a great question, because doesn't USC not join the Big Ten until August?
It's the end of June, July 1st, basically. So spring football will still happen. My guess is the fact that the Pac-12 network isn't going to Las Vegas for this one, they're probably not putting in the work, my guess, to broadcast all the spring games. I can check with Yogi. Actually, I'll do that, like maybe next voicemail. I'll text Yogi to see if they're planning on doing spring games. But this might have been the last football thing the Pac-12 network showed, the Stanford Notre Dame blowout game. So that might be it.
For whatever reason, USC and UCLA don't officially join the Big Ten until August 2nd for some contractual reasons.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. I thought the contract ended. So maybe, yeah. So I think the contract ended July 1st. So the TV contract and all that. Oh, that's interesting that it would be August 2nd. Okay. Well, this summer. And then you kind of get things rolling. Okay. So we did get a voicemail. I think there might have been a couple. And if you remember, I think it was with Harvey Hyde last week, where the caller said, hey, I'm going to keep this short. It was like 3 minutes long. So we can't play that. He tried to keep it short. He's like, you probably won't play this, but I'm going to really try to keep it short. This was like 1.5 minutes long. So this is still long, but this is his shorter version. So I will play it for you. Here you go, guys.
Hi, Ryan. I feel like you're not going to play my messages, so I'm going to make this like even shorter. And I think we need to be honest. Pat Hayden, Lynn Swan, Max Nikias, Lane Kiffin, Steve Sarkisian, Mike Bone, Lincoln Riley doing 1/3 of his job, offense, no defense, no special teams, getting paid $10 million per year, medical scandals, administration scandals for 15 years, which has affected the revenues of your company, obviously, and has hurt the people that are alumni of USC. The Board of Trustees and the Executive Committee need to go, starting with Carol Fold. Over and over and over. If it was 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, it's been 15 years. I'd appreciate if you play this during Coach's interview, because Coach is direct, he's on point, he's got a history, and he'll call it out. This has absolutely been going on for 15 years. The executive board at USC has to go. It has to go. 15 years of incompetence. If your employees did 1/3 of their job and they just did reporting but didn't do the videos and didn't go to practice, you'd fire them. If my employees did the same, I'd fire them. Lincoln Riley is going to get destroyed in the Big Ten. He's not qualified, and we're in trouble. 15 years of incompetence. They have to go. Executive board at USC, I hope you're hearing this. You've done a terrible job. You should be fired.
All right. So he didn't leave a name, but that was shorter, so that was good. Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about the leadership being poor for years, and part of it, the Board of Trustees at USC was way too big. They've definitely pared it down. I don't know a lot about the inner workings of that, but I think they worked on it as far as like not having as many people that were involved in all this stuff. You're some big donor and you just get to be on the board. It was too many people, but they've had bad presidents, and you hope that changes with Carol Folt. You've had really, really bad athletic directors, and I think they got a little bit better with Mike Bone. I think they've got better even now with Jen Cohen. They've had bad head coaching hires. Now, the caller doesn't like Lincoln Riley, but his track record, is very good. Compared to what USC's hired in the past, no one's had anywhere near the success of a college head coach that USC hired, looking at a resume, in like 90 years. Like it was like Howard Jones was the last guy that had like a resume that was like, oh, I've had success coaching college football and as a head coach. No one USC's hired has ever had that until Lincoln Riley. So you feel like they've made better hires. Can you fix decades of incompetent leadership like overnight? No. But I think it takes, good hire. Like you got better with Mike Bohn, and there were problems still. But then you get even better with Jen Cohen, I think you got a lot better getting Lincoln Riley. And who knows, maybe the next hire, he brings the program back, and whatever he does or retires or goes to the NFL or whatever he does, then the next guy is even better than that. So I feel like you've got to build on it. But they've been incompetent as far as leadership goes for a really long time. I just don't know enough about the board now. I think it's been restructured. I think it's been pared down. So hopefully it's better. But they're part of all of these bad decisions that were made for years and years and years.
Yeah, that's a little too in the weeds for me. I just wonder what the caller was thinking when Lincoln Riley was hired, because it seems like the board has this awful track record according to him, but Riley's track record is undeniable. So I still think he was a good hire, even though people disagree. I kind of think things are changing a little bit, looking at Jen Cohen and looking at Lincoln Riley. So, I mean, bad things can change, I think, but he seems really upset and burned by past actions, and I get it. It was really ugly being a USC fan for a long time, but I don't know if all the anger right now makes a lot of sense. The year was bad, but you know what I mean? Like, let's let him try to get out of this hole.
Yeah, let him try, dig out of this one. But there's really been horrible leadership, and I've talked about that for years. I've talked about how bad the leadership was, but it looks like it's getting better. I think they've hired better people to do the jobs. You've had, the kind of hires, like to get Pat Hayden and Lynn Swann as your athletic directors back to back, like zero experience, one failed. Let's do it again with someone that has even, less of a resume to be that. Like Pat Hayden, you could say some things like, well, here's why it might work. Like Lynn Swann, the only thing was he was a football player at USC. Like that's literally the only thing he brought to the table. I think they thought that he could get the old donors, that like nostalgic donors that love the heyday of USC, to give money. He wouldn't give those people the time of day. He was terrible at all that stuff. So, that was probably the worst hire ever. There's so many bad hires, and you've had scandals with Max Nikias, the president, and all this. I mean, there's so many scandals that were just money based, like money motivated. So you're right, but I feel like you're getting better at that stuff. You're trying to hire better people, and I guess that's all you can do. All right. We had a text message from Marcel in the IE. He says, I remember Reggie Bush saying the practices under Pete Carroll were harder than games. Is that a thing of the past?
Keon Bars this year said the practices were harder than games before USC ran into some trouble with losing games. So I kind of think that's just something that people say. And maybe under Lincoln Riley, it was, or Pete Carroll, it was true. But you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I wouldn't put too much stock into that because people are saying that now, and I don't think the practices are nearly as hard as they were under Pete Carroll.
That's a buzz. Like you say, iron sharpens iron. Like, okay, we're practicing hard, blah, blah, blah. Like, there was a real aspect to that for Pete Carroll, because you would talk to like Sean Cody or some of the guys that were going that, and it was almost like a relief when you got to the games because it was just they worked super hard. A lot of the rules have changed too, so you can't do that as much. So I don't know if anyone's practices are harder than the games, but I think USC's practices could be harder than what they have been. Let's do a few YouTube chats. Matthew, why would we go to the transfer portal for another quarterback? Malachi was a 5-star, number 1 recruit in the nation. Is he not developing as expected?
Haven't had a chance to talk to him in a long time. Riley, of course, won't say anything about that. But you're a reporter. You got to do a better job. Well, it'll all work itself out. If a transfer comes in, a highly touted guy who's obviously going to start, then clearly Malachi Nelson hasn't developed as planned. And if USC stands pat and it's a Moss-Nelson battle, Riley clearly feels good about one of those guys. Maybe he brings in like a Jake Jensen transfer type, a guy who won't play but will just fill some depth for you. Then he has developed as well as people thought. time will tell on that. Nothing we can really say right now.
Yeah. Blackie Chan says, what do you think about UCLA keeping Chip Kelly? And did you see the banner flown over Los Angeles about Chip? I did not see the banner. I mean, I saw that it happened, but I didn't personally see it. It's interesting that they kept Chip. I think it's pretty risky. David Woods, my partner on the Podcast of Champions, was tweeting a whole lot of data about why a 500 head coach at UCLA after 6 years or whatever it's been is as bad as you've seen. This was a bad year. Like I mentioned, they had scored 31 total points in 4 games and then got up for the USC game. You give them credit that they got up to play USC. USC didn't get up to play for that game, but they weren't able to get up and play some of these other games. They let Arizona State, that was really bad, sort of swing and get them to death. It's I think it's probably a mistake to keep Chip Kelly. But, I guess we'll see. But I think there's risks for for getting rid of him too. But I feel like you kind of needed something fresh to go into the Big Ten. And now it might be a little behind, I think, joining the Big Ten if you have to make a change a year from now.
I agree. I think he doesn't like to recruit, and that's a killer. They haven't had a top 30 class, I don't think, in his tenure. Getting Dante Moore was huge, but Dante Moore looks ruined right now. He threw some awful interceptions in that game, and I don't think he's going to stick around at UCLA. Maybe he does. Maybe I'll be wrong on that. But you know what I mean? Just based on how it's gone this year, your star-studded, save-the-program recruit kind of fell on his face a little bit, and Chip Kelly's the offensive guy. So their defense was what won him a lot of these games, and he's the offensive guy. I would have moved on from him, but I don't know about the financial situation, or I don't know about the stuff behind the scenes, but just on face value, were the results good enough this year, and could UCLA do better? I think they could. People might feel differently, but you know what I mean? I think they could have done a better job.
Yeah, Dante Moore, I feel like maybe you shouldn't have started him, let him play the second half of the season. They start him, and then Garbers comes in, and they're like, wow, you're way better when you don't turn the ball over. He's just been a turnover machine. And then when he gets benched, he comes back, and he's still a turnover machine. You thought, okay, maybe he was, freshman, first few games. Man, he puts the ball in peril a lot. So they got to do something with that. But, who knows? He could be someone that enters the freaking portal and ends up like Oregon or something. I don't know. Tamale Tom had a couple questions. His first one, what value did Cliff Kingsbury bring to USC, and how can we measure his contributions?
Another great question. He worked a lot with the quarterbacks, so I could tell you that. But beyond that, Marshawn Lloyd mentioned once how he had a bad first half, and Cliff Kingsbury talked to him, and he boosted him up. We're just not around enough, and people don't talk enough about Cliff Kingsbury. I don't really know how you can measure his impact, because Caleb Williams is so good. If Cliff Kingsbury wasn't here, would he have had as good of a season? I still think so, based off of what he did last year. That's a really tough question that I think, and I don't want to be the guy who piles on Lincoln Riley, he didn't do enough for the media this year, but that's just something we aren't able to answer because we can't watch practice, can't talk to Kingsbury because he's not an official assistant. He's not at the media day, so I don't really know what the heck he did.
Yeah, it's hard, but he's an analyst, so I think it's, what you're going to talk about, what everyone on the staff, what did Lincoln Riley's secretary bring to the table? He's a big name because he was a former NFL head coach, but he didn't have a prominent role on this team. He was there to be an analyst, really just to kind of help out behind the scenes and help out the quarterbacks. And USC lost a couple of guys, like a grad assistant that was helping with Caleb Williams. 2 of the guys that were working with Caleb Williams last year. So you bring in someone, you want analysts like Cliff Kingsbury. Jim Leonard was an analyst for Illinois this year, and he didn't even go to games. He wasn't even on the road for games. So, he's a great defensive coordinator, but you brought him in his analyst role. So his role was small, but it's sort of like you keep around the game. He can kind of help out little things behind the scenes. I don't think you didn't bring in Cliff Kingsbury to fix the you didn't fix anything on the offense, but change the offense. He's there as an analyst, and he keeps working, and he doesn't get paid much money, so he's still getting a bunch of money from the Cardinals. And, you use that, we saw Steve Sarkisian do that, and I think Lane Kiffin also with Alabama, and they kind of get there. It's a way to sort of resurrect your career. It's like a year off, but you're not really taking a year off, So Cliff Kingsbury wasn't like working super hard. He was an analyst for USC football, like working with the Heisman Trophy winner Caleb Williams. So I don't know why people get kind of obsessed with that, but it's just like he's an offensive analyst. Like he's not like he's not your offensive coordinator or anything.
I think he's just a sounding board. Hey, what do you think of this play?
Yeah.
I like this. Why don't you try doing that? That's how I describe him. I don't think he had any like great coaching relationships with any of these guys. I think he was there for the games, there for the practices, helped out, but like you said, Ryan, I don't think he had this major role.
Yeah. It's just a big name, so people expect, but his role was not big. His second question was, what the heck happened to Anthony Lucas? Did his off-field issues follow him to L.A.?
No, Sean Nua just said Solomon Byrd made it so hard for them to take him off the field. So Anthony Lucas, for whatever reason, lost his competition to Solomon Byrd, and now that Solomon Bird's gone, I expect Anthony Lucas to come in and play a little bit more.
Yeah. Jeff says he's still getting, so he's talking about Cliff Kingsbury, still getting $7 million a year from Arizona, which is pretty good. Joe is like, fire Cliff. There's a lot of people that want Cliff Kingsbury fired. Like, he's a bit player, Like you go in, you want a food analogy? Like, you go into your favorite restaurant and the food isn't quite as good, and you're like, hey, we need to fire the dishwasher. I want you to fire the dishwasher. Like, so? Like, what? Okay, you get a better dishwasher? Do you think the food's going to get better? Like, he's got a minor role. Like, I don't know, firing him. Like, he's going to move on somewhere else and get he's up for, I think, the Houston job. At least someone reported that.
I tweeted that he's the favorite from BetOnline AG. Maybe you saw that. He's the the betting odds favorite to be the next Houston coach.
But he's just an analyst. Like you fire him. Like, who cares? Like you're paying him like nothing. He's getting paid by the Cardinals. I don't get why people get obsessed with that. We got one last one in the chat. This one, Blackie Chan. If T-Mac, Teteroa McMillan, rumors are true that he's going to transfer, do you think USC makes a run at him?
Him and Noah Fafita are like brothers. The only way I think they're gone is if they're a package deal. And I just think even if they were considering leaving, Arizona, it's been so good at Arizona this year. I don't know about Fafita's NFL future, but if you're T-Mac, you're going to be a first-round pick most likely. Why wouldn't you want to play one more year of college with your best friend and your family? I don't really see them leaving. I don't think that makes a ton of sense.
And Singer came over and didn't do anything. So, it's sort of like if it was Arizona Cardinals going to hire Lincoln Riley, like he's got Cliff Kingsbury there to be like, don't go, And I feel like Singer would probably be like, hey, don't go. It didn't work out for me. So that seems like a weird, I don't see that happening.
It's interesting too. Fafita was not that highly touted 5-star guy. So it's not like if he enters the portal after, say he didn't play at all, he enters the portal, no one wants him. Jed Fish made him into who he is. He built him up. And this was a guy who had a lot of talent. He was a fantastic high school player. But you know what I mean? Like, he's not just going to hop into the portal. I think he owes Jed Fish. Jed Fish kind of owes him. I think there's a good relationship there. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah. One last question. The DC will be hired, but what about a special teams coach/coordinator? That aspect was abysmal, and Lincoln needs to address it, or it will be the Achilles heel.
I don't think that's happening. It's just we get this question every week. Riley doesn't believe in it. It's a fundamental thing with him. Not happening.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to, but I feel like you could change the structure a little bit where if maybe one of the defensive coaches that comes in on the defensive side when you get a new defensive coordinator has a lot of special teams experience, and you're like, okay, you're going to be the de facto special teams coordinator, like you're the head of it, and then, instead of having like a grad assistant or an analyst running it, you have an actual full-time assistant that's the other part of his job is he's also the acting special teams coordinator, maybe something like that. We'll see. He didn't make any changes last year. There are definitely changes this year, obviously. But is that going to be one of them? I don't know. But his philosophy, like Connor said, is not to instead of bringing in the outside linebackers coach, we're going to bring in a special teams coordinator. Don't expect that, but maybe some structural changes of how this is run internally.
That's a good point. I wonder who, if they take half their job, like Zach Hansen, tight ends and special teams, would Riley do something like that just to make it a figurehead? I kind of feel like he's gotten so much criticism for special teams. Why would he say, hey, someone on the staff, just go be the head, so then I don't have to get all this criticism. It'll go to you. You know what I mean? I feel like he's setting up someone to fail there.
Yeah, because you can't talk to anybody that runs special teams. So it's but he still gets a little defensive about it. Like he was asked about special teams being bad, I think at the UCLA press conference, and he said they had like the number 1 punt return or something like that. And it's like, they might have at one point, but there's no way they do now. They're Bill Connolly. Do you know what it is now? Like what their special teams was ranked at the end of the season?
I'd have to look, but they were last for a while, right?
They were 133 out of 133 or something. So like that, it was bad. Overall, special teams was bad. So I think the fans see it. We'll see if he makes some kind of change, but don't expect. You're hiring this outside special teams coordinator to come in and take one of your full-time assistant spots. Don't think that's happening. Most likely not happening, but maybe a little structure change. And one of the guys that came in used to be a special teams coordinator. He'll be running it and also coaching outside linebackers or whatever it is. All right. Well, good stuff. It's good to get back in here in the studio and chat about some USC football with you, Connor. Always fun.
Appreciate it, Ryan. Hopefully next week we'll have more to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. And thanks for everyone that tuned in. We had a whole bunch of people live, so thank you for that. If you're live on YouTube, we did get to triple-digit likes. We got to 100 likes in there, so thank you for that. We didn't get any super chats this week. People just kind of throw those in sometimes, but
darn,
we don't need those. Yeah, but that's save your money for the holidays and all that. So thank you so much. I want to thank Trader Joe's again. Many years of sponsorship with the Peristyle Podcast. They've been a great partner. We appreciate them very, very much. And I appreciate Connor, my entire staff, and all of you out there listening or watching. We thank you so much for being part of our show. The biggest USC podcast out there. We've been doing it the longest since 2008. We've been started this stuff. So it's been a while. Connor, you haven't been here from the beginning, right? Not since 2008?
That's correct.
Okay. From the earlier this year, though.
Yeah.
So that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got some new people. We got some people that have been around for a long time, like me. But we do appreciate being part of it and helping the show grow and all of that. And we have a lot of fun kind of bringing all the USC news to you guys. So for Connor Morrissette, I am Ryan Abraham. Hope you guys enjoyed the show, and we will talk to you next time.